and welcome to Science Fiction, Race, and Racism. This is a video blogging channel about the most famous and influential works in science fiction and how they deal with the issues of race, ethnicity, racism, prejudice, and intolerance. Both the best and the worst, the most groundbreaking and insightful, and the most callous and clueless. Science fiction has a long history of both being opposed to racism, prejudice, and intolerance, but also of conscious or unconscious racism. Sci-fi fans, authors, and works are often said to be above, beyond, incapable of, and far past any prejudice. That is often the appeal of sci-fi, especially the most utopian works. Sometimes a sci-fi setting, story, or theme can be another way to comment upon, critique, or tear apart prejudice and hatred. For others, sci-fi is pure escapism, a way to get away from such issues. Sometimes this backfires. The most escapist sci-fi works are often the most racist. Sometimes the same three approaches or beliefs coexist within a work of sci-fi, within an author or a sci-fi fan. My name is Carroll. I'm Associate Professor of History at Northern Virginia Community College. I teach American, American Indian, and Latin American history. I've written mostly about wars, veterans, human rights, and genocide. I've also written some science fiction, mostly alternate history, including a sci-fi alternate history book, The Man in Black, the first of a series. This is the fifth of 6 videos about the most popular and influential sci-fi series of all time, Star Trek. In over 50 years, there have been 8 television series, 13 films, plus novels, comics, magazines, games, theme parks, exhibits, fan conventions, fan-made films and series, fan fiction, and huge numbers of fan sites. A big part of its popularity is its optimism, idealism, even utopian vision. Its point of view, infinite diversity and infinite combinations, is a central part of why it caught on and remains influential. The first series began in the middle of the civil rights and anti-war movements. It had a multiracial cast in a time when that was still very unusual. It had in Spock a mixed-race character, presented as mixed species, and mixed-race relationships at a time in which it was actually illegal in much of America and the world. But for all of its powerful symbolism and arguments for a future where racism and prejudice were problems of the distant past, the series and films often show themselves to be still very powerfully influenced by the racist assumptions of the time in which it was made. Start with something very obvious. Most of the original cast and crew were whites, European ancestry. Out of 8 regular characters, 6 of them were white, 5 of them white males. These proportions are roughly similar for the rest of the crew and the rest of Starfleet depicted. In the future, are European ancestry people 3/4 of Earth's population? This has never been true at any time in human history, not even after multiple genocides. Surely Star Trek writers were not arguing whites, who make up only 1 out of 6 of all humans, make up 3/4 of all humans in space in the future. This would imply either mass deaths for others in wars or plagues, or that in the future, outside of North America and Europe, have low technology, or either never desired or were not allowed space travel. Obviously, Gene Roddenberry and his writers were constrained by what American network TV would allow at the time. Compare the original Star Trek cast to the other series of the time, almost all of them all white, and the original Star Trek looks downright radical. A cast that was mostly Asian, African, Latino, and Arab came much closer in later series and films, though it took another 2 series to have as a main character a captain who wasn't white. We should start by defining Middle Eastern as all those descended from the Middle East region. Arabs, Iranians, North Africans, and Jewish people. While Jewish is a religion, not a race, almost all are born into it. Converts are unusual. It is also usually an ethnicity and a culture that includes those who don't practice the faith. The 2 central actors from the original series, William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy, are or were both Jewish. The 2 of them became friends because of their common experience facing anti-Semitism. Nimoy also acted in a film on Holocaust survivors, Never Forget. Spock's famous Vulcan hand gesture, 2 fingers parted to each side, was an imitation of Jewish priest blessing the congregation. The fingers represent the letter Shin, the start of a word which symbolizes God's name. Nimoy has also often spoke about how he felt Star Trek's values were very compatible with and influenced by Jewish beliefs on social justice. For representations of Arabs in Star Trek, we need to discuss Klingons. Klingons in the original series are shown as inherently dangerous and warlike, with dark hair and skin and eyes. One can find many arguments online, usually from bigots like this example, equating Klingons to Arabs, or inaccurately, Klingon to Arab to Muslim, though most Muslims aren't Arabs. Actor John Callous worked with makeup artists to create the appearance of the first Klingons. They were not supposed to be Arabs, but Russians, in Gene Roddenberry's Cold War analogy, but Callous suggested they have a more, quote, Mongolian appearance. So they were darkened, and tufts-like beards added to look like Northern Asians. While Klingons were not intended to be Arabs, an Arab actor played one of the most memorable. Michael Ansara was born Syrian and Lebanese. In his long career, he played many natives and Mexicans, and he played Klingon Captain Kang in the original series, and then in Deep Space Nine, and then finally in Voyager. Ansara was the first actor to imbue the Klingons with any nobility, cunning, and strength, in a way that influenced future portrayals of them. Star Trek did use several alien species as stand-ins or representations of the Middle East. In Next Generation, the Bajoran are introduced, a refugee people fleeing Cardassian violence. Writer-producer Rick Berman conceived of them as explicitly like Palestinians. Producer Ronald Moore compared them to Israelis or Iranians, and the Cardassians as like Germans or Russians. Bajorans were used as forced labor by Cardassians. They often resisted by terrorism, but many aspects of the culture don't fit Arab or Israeli cultures. They have a caste system. They are matriarchal, and their religion involves communion with actual, scientifically proven to exist deities, or at least very powerful aliens. Bajorans played even larger roles in Deep Space Nine and then Voyager. Next Generation also introduced the Ferengi, though they were most prominent in Deep Space Nine. Their name comes from the Arab word for Westerner, first used to describe English and French traders. There is also a Persian or Iranian word, Ferengi, meaning foreigner. The Ferengi are intended to be everything bad about current American or Western society. They are a culture based on and glorifying greed. Their religion is capitalism of the worst kind, based on rules of acquisition, where hell is conceived of as poverty. They are also lying, untrustworthy, and treacherous. They are sex-obsessed, but hypocritical about it, the farthest thing from sexual liberation. Females are extremely oppressed, including being forbidden to wear clothing. They also can't hold office, speak in public, and are inferior in marriage. Thus the Ferengi are not caricatures of Arabs or Jews, but intended to show how the West appears to those in the Mideast, or most cultures outside the West. Still, their appearance has led to some speculation online. Having large noses and being greedy led some to conclude they are thinly veiled anti-Semitism. But the two longest-running Ferengi characters were played by Jewish actors. Both of them deliberately poke fun at anti-Semitic stereotypes. In Deep Space Nine, Star Trek introduced its first explicitly Arab character, Dr. Julian Bashir, played by Sudanese actor Sadiq Al-Fidil, later with the stage name of Alexander Sadiq. At the time of casting, the U.S. was only 2 years past the end of the Gulf War. But the choice was because of the actor. Originally, he was going to be Julian Amaros, a Latino doctor. Producers originally wanted Sadiq to play Captain Sisko, but then made him the doctor since he was too young to have a teenage son. This is the end of the 6th video. I look forward to your comments and questions. Please repost freely, like, share, and comment. Next video we'll discuss Planet of the Apes and race. This has been Science Fiction, Race, and Racism video blog and channel.